And I'll just plug this in and we'll be good to go. All right. Okay. Thank everybody for your patience. Okay, here we go. Hopefully no more technical difficulty. I think I'm hearing an echo, but we'll see what happens. Y'all can let me know if that's the case. All right, thank you everyone for being here. Again, I'm Chelsea Carter, and I'm the CEO of Futuristic Innovators. I'm going to tell you more about what my company is, what I do, and the reason I'm here today. Right, so the name of my presentation is called You, the Real MVP. And has anyone heard of MVP? And when I ask that, I don't mean most valuable player, right? And we hear about that in sports. But I'm actually referring to minimum viable product. So raise your hand if you've heard of that at all. Okay, good, good. Has anyone created an MVP app before? Okay, good. So I'm talking to the right audience. That's great. So today I'm going to be talking about Adalo, which is a known platform for MVP development, as well as Flutterflow, which is a new one that's been created recently that can also help developers such as ourselves be able to create MVP apps. So more about me is that, as Mac mentioned, I'm an MVP developer for TechTown, and I have the opportunity to work with founders to help them realize their ideas. And that can be a love-hate relationship. The reason I say that is because founders usually want the world. They want this, they want this, they want that. But the problem is that you have limited time to do that. Let's make sure that's working. But you have limited time when it comes to actually building the app for them in the time that they want to, especially when it comes to the budget that they have. Most founders want the world, but their budget is very, very small. So how do you make that a reality? And you have to have that honest conversation with them to let them know that what you want may not be possible, but I will create something to the best of my ability in the time being. So that's where I come in. I have these conversations with founders. You kind of have to set the record straight, set the tone early on, so you know what can be done and what can't be done, but be flexible. And that's what you probably know as well as MVP developers. So I'll go ahead and get started. I graduated from Kettering University in Flint, Michigan back in 2020 with my bachelor's in computer engineering with minors in cybersecurity and computer science. And I'm a full-time engineer right now at a company called Infor, which is based in New York, but there were offices in Ann Arbor at the time, but I've been working from home since 2020 due to the pandemic. So let's go ahead and get started. What am I talking about today? I had the opportunity to work with a company called Charged Up To Go. And I'll let you know, as we work through these technical difficulties, I'll let you know more about Charged Up To Go. So Charged Up To Go is a company that has a mobile charging unit that allows for EV chargers, EV customers to be able to purchase from them charging sessions. And what that means is this: I'm an EV owner, I'm going to go onto the app for Charged Up To Go, and I'm going to ask Charged Up To Go to charge my vehicle at my home, at my place of work, or I can come to the charging unit and get it charged there. And I work with this company to help them build their MVP in 6 weeks. And as a developer, I faced many challenges because some of the requirements of the application were not considered minimum viable product. Because we had used a tool called Adalo. And Adalo is very limited. And I wish this thing would work today, so bear with me for 1 second.
I'm going to try something.
Okay, not a problem.
Because you're using a Mac adapter, or no?
No, just a regular adapter here at the HDMI. Yeah, well, while she's working through that, thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to let you know is that that's what Charged Up To Go is about. And what I did was, at the initial conversation with them, I had them write down the requirements that they needed. And one of the requirements is this: when you think of mobile charging units and the fact that you have to go to that particular person and charge up their vehicle, you have to make sure they have enough money on their card, their credit card or their debit card, before you actually go visit them and charge up their vehicle. It's similar to a gas station model where you have to do pre-authorizations. You make sure that they have that certain amount on their card before starting the actual transmitting of the gas or transmitting of the electric fuel to be able to provide that for them. So one of the requirements was pre-authorizations, but Adalo, I learned, does not provide a widget for pre-authorizations. And I'll get into that when I show the code later, but that's one opportunity that I had to face. So what I did was I had to work with Stripe API. So Stripe has an API available to us. There's a lot of code that they provide us with in order to make our lives easier. And with that, I had to make sure I could secure those pre-authorizations that customers had to go through before they could get their vehicles charged. Also, another requirement of my founder was this: we had to make sure that, depending on the time of day, goodness gracious, depending on the time of day, it would be a certain rate that that customer gets charged. For example, let's say it's between 12 and 7 p.m., they would get charged a certain rate per kilowatt hour because that's considered peak hours. But outside of peak hours, it would be where they would get charged a lesser rate just because we're not as busy, for example. So that's another thing I had to do with my custom API. And last but not least, I work with Google Calendar integration. So since we're saying that customers are supposed to book a session, a charging session with our company, we have to have an event that shows up on a calendar for them to be able to schedule from, right? So I work with my founder's Google Calendar and I connected it to it in order to get dynamic updates. So whenever he creates an event on his calendar, it will show automatically on the app itself and allows that user to book those sessions. So those are some of the things I'll walk through today as I go through what I did. And the question you may be asking yourself is, why should you care? So of course you raised your hand earlier and you said that you were MVP developers or maybe interested in it. That's why I'll talk about 3 things such as efficiency, scalability, and technical ingenuity. Those are 3 things we have to worry about, especially being founders and being developers, because it's about scalability. That app may work right now, but will it work when 10,000 people sign up for it? Will it be too slow? Because we're all about making sure we get the fastest app we can out there as fast as we can. That's why you have to think about scalability from day one. Because let's say you get a lot of customer base, you can't handle that, you're losing money, you're losing opportunities. So let's talk about that in just a bit. So one thing I had to deal with was streamlined development, meaning that Adalo was an MVP tool. It comes with a set of tools I can use. But the problem is it doesn't have everything I need in that tool. So do I not use it? Do I use something else? And I had to use Adalo because I only had experience with Adalo as a no-code tool, but I had to leverage outside ability in order to bridge that gap. And that's where synergy comes in because of the custom API. Also, understanding API documentation. Even though we think that Adalo should have everything we need, obviously it didn't, and that's the reason why I had to look at this external documentation to bridge that gap. And then the scalability. Being able to retrieve those events that he adds on his calendar at any point and be able to make sure that it shows up on the app, that's imperative as well. Let us continue. So I'll get into how everything works, and then we'll go into the live demo, which I hope will be a little bit better. So how it works. Of course you have the Adalo app itself, which actually runs the front end, so that's what you see visually. And it has a built-in database as well. But then you connect that app to the custom API to retrieve data from the third-party applications, such as Google Calendar's API, such as Stripe API, and I'll show you how that was done. All right, so let's actually get into the live demo at this point. So what I'll do is show you the process of actually signing up for an account with Charged Up to Go. So I'll enter in some credentials and we'll go from there. All right, so I'm signing up with my first name, last name, and all my information. Of course, there's a disclaimer that you have to read before you sign up for anything, just to make sure, hey, we are supposed to be charging your vehicle and only doing that, so anything else we are not liable for. So that's what you see here. And you'll read over that information, read the terms, of course, and once you have agreed to do so, you'll be able to sign your first and last name just to confirm that you agree with those terms. Here we go. So after that, we actually create a profile. Of course, you can create a profile by uploading your picture if you desire to. You can enter your phone number, and I'll just do that. Okay. And then are you a user or are you a driver? So right now we have 2 different interfaces. When somebody signs up, they can be a user like yourself, or they can be a driver, somebody who is actually employed through the company to drive to those people's locations and actually charge their vehicles. But for the sake of this example, we'll be saying we are a user. Okay, the next step in the process is actually to select your vehicles, because we provide you with a list of vehicles that we say are the ones we can charge based off of our chargers itself. So you have to go through the list and you're able to filter. So I'm going to look for Cadillac, for example, and I can find that there is a Cadillac Lyriq that can be charged, as well as a Cadillac Escalade that you'll see in just a second. Okay, once this is coming back up, bear with me for 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's say I select the Cadillac Lyriq. That's the first vehicle that I own that I would like to have charged. And then there's a pop-up that appears to ask you, would you like to add additional vehicles? So I can say yes or no. I'll say yes, and I'll add one more, which will be the Cadillac Escalade. Okay. And then from there, I'll click on no, saying those are all my vehicles. Then I'm prompted to enter in the vehicle information about those vehicles. All right. Okay, so from there I have to click on, let's say, Cadillac Escalade. Okay, so once I click on that, I enter in the car color. So let's say that I have a white Cadillac Escalade. Then it'll prompt me for license plate number, which I can enter here, as well as an image. That just allows us to be able to recognize, you know, what kind of vehicle I do have and what does it actually look like. So let's see here. Okay, Cadillac Escalade. So I upload that image, and then from there I can click on update vehicle information. And then I repeat that process again for the Cadillac Lyriq. So I'll do that, say it's black. Let's see here, 2, 4, 5, 6. And then I'll upload an image as well for that. So after that process is done and I've uploaded my vehicles that I have, the next step is for me to add the addresses that I have, right? So I can put in a home address. It can even retrieve my current device location, so it picks up that I'm at 461, so that's a great job there, and I can update that address information. I can add my work, I can add other addresses as I like. So now I'm finally in the app, I've done the onboarding process, now it's time to see how the app really works. So there are 3 options, and really 2 that we focus on for our users, which is schedule a charge ASAP. So schedule a charge ASAP means I'll schedule one from now until 24 hours from now. So when I click on that, you'll see that it's going to showcase if there are any calendar events only for May 11th, which is today, as well as May 12th, tomorrow. But what you'll notice as well, there's a schedule a charge for later. So that means 24 hours and greater, up to 7 days. So that allows for me to schedule something in advance. Maybe I'm out of town, maybe I'm doing something. And you'll notice that there's a dot for the 15th because there actually is a time slot available. So if I click on that, I'll notice that it says new charging slot. Let me just make sure my back end is working just fine before I do this. Because sometimes when we're doing our testing, we have our back end on a server, and that server sometimes actually goes down for just a little bit before we get the chance to use it. So I want to make sure that this is up and running in the meantime. And we're using our back-end server is actually being held on Render. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but Render's one example where anytime I publish my code, it actually automatically deploys to that server. So Render is an available example, and there's plenty of servers out there. And that was necessary for me just because Adalo didn't have the capability that I needed. So once this is up and running, and I'll take a look at my Render server just to make sure, then we can see that process happening in the back end. So right now it's queuing up the server. And I want to make sure that that's fully working. Yep, so almost there, but yeah, like I said, just to say more about it, is MVP development in itself is such a such a great environment to get into early on, great industry, all because people are looking for the quickest app they can get before getting into the real world, right? It's like if you only have such amount of budget, it's best to create that app in MVP mode just to see if it's viable. Because we may have an idea and it may be great to us, but once we get it out in the real world, we'll recognize that it's really not all that great and we got to humble ourselves. So that's the way to test that out in the market before investing thousands and thousands of dollars of cash into it, to say the least. So let me see if this back-end server is going. Okay, while that's queuing up. Another thing to mention is that it's such a great industry to be in because, again, I was a part of TechTown through the MVP development program, and that's why I created a business solely for MVP development because of the fact that those relationships you build afterwards are worth every penny. Okay, so I do see the servers up and running, so let me go ahead and show you the next step if I go here for the application. So I'm going to click on this time slot here. So next thing is what I ask me is to select the vehicle I would like to charge. And how this list gets populated is based on the vehicles that you actually add into your onboarding process. So I'll say I'm getting the Lyriq charged. So next thing that it asks me to do is enter in my current battery level as well as the level that I would like to get charged to. And then it also asks me would I prefer to charge at my desired location or charge up to go location. So let's say I click on that. What happens in the background is this. In our database, we have a list of locations that exist where we are stationary all the time. So what we're going to do here is be able to pull the person's current location, so they'll see I'm at 461, and we'll try to find the closest charged up to the go location that's closest to where we're at currently. So what you'll see in just a second as this is queuing up, eventually it'll show me that I have a location that's located on 7451 Woodward, and that's the closest location to where I'm currently located. So it asks me if I want to select that location or not. And once I do that, here's the next step, convenience fee time. It's time to pay. So what we do is that we charge a convenience fee anytime that a user decides to have a charge initiated, and it's a $25 convenience fee at this moment. And another thing we do is that you cannot see the text there, you may be able to if you got some good eyes, but it says 55 cents per kilowatt hour is what's being charged. And you're probably wondering, how is this number calculated? Like I was saying earlier, in the back end, I have some code that I'll show you in just a bit, where based off of the time of day, since it's 11:16, I think it's within the peak hours. I think it's 11 to 7 p.m. So since it's peak hours, they're getting charged a higher rate than they would if they were outside that 11 to 7 range. In addition to that, a $75 hold is placed. And when you see this text here in just a bit, the 75 is being pulled from his Stripe account. My founder Stripe account has all these values in there. So if he changes them right now and I run this app again, you'll see those updated automatically because of the APIs that we're using. So anyway, a $75 hold is placed on their account, and this is just a summary of the time slot they selected, the location, all that info. So I'll enter in my card credentials really quick. Let's see, oh, I'm gonna put a greater date. Let's see here, and then CVV. And then I'll click on submit payment. And what you'll notice in a second, when I click on submit payment, it's gonna take a while, and I'll explain why that is. This particular box that you saw where I enter my credit card information in, what it was doing is it's charging the $25 convenience fee, but also behind the scenes, I have to make sure to initiate that $75 hold on their account at the same time. There's nothing on Adalo that allows me to do that, so I had to pair that with the process of them paying the $25. So as soon as I get their payment method for that $25, I'm going to use that same payment method to initiate the actual hold on their account. And we give the users 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, to say whether they really want to confirm it or not. But let's say I click on confirm. So then it just gives me information just saying that a Google Calendar invite will come to your account and just lets you know all of that. So if I go over to my account right now in just a second, I should be able to get an email. So you'll notice right here, I get this email, which is an invitation that's saying, okay, you have this charging slot session. It's going to be located at 7451 Woodward Avenue, and just lets you know what time and date and gives you those reminders, right? So all of that is because of code that I created, and I'm gonna go walk through that process right now, all right? So that's just the gist of the app, and as you go back to the calendar itself, you'll notice that there's no more calendar events on there. There's no more slots. So what I'll do now is talk about how did I integrate the Stripe API into this back-end code. All right, so let me zoom this in some for you. Okay. Here we go. So this is the calendar service Java class that I created. I did all my backend in Java for those who are familiar. So raise your hand if you do know about the Java language by chance. Okay, perfect. Love it. People have a love-hate relationship with it. I love it. I've been using it since I was in college, so that's why I picked it. I know people like Python. They have all different types, but you can implement this in any language you like. So what I'll do at this point is I'll scroll up some just to show you the process that it took for me to actually retrieve the calendar events from Kevin's calendar. First thing first, right? So I actually create a variable called now, and I get the current time. Because remember, I'm retrieving the current time in order to be able to determine what rate I should charge them. The peak hours rate or the standard rate. So after I get the current time, I also create a variable called now plus 1 hour. And that's where I'm actually just want to make sure that they can't book anything right now, like this current second, because we may be out in the field actually charging other people's vehicles. So it gives us a little buffer time, should I say. The next thing that I do on this line is that I'm actually checking to see what's 24 hours from now. The reason for that is because I want to make sure that we're checking for events that are, if we're doing the ASAP time, it needs to be 1 hour from now all the way up to 24 hours from today's date. Then I create another variable here. And this variable is responsible for making sure I check to see what's 1 week from now. And that's because of the later session that they could be able to book. So then from there, what I'm doing is I'm getting the times. I have to convert this over to date time format. The reason for that is because Adalo has a certain format that allows for our events to be in. So that is considered to be date time. So I get the local time and I convert it to date time objects. So I find what the minimum time is that they can book and what's the maximum time that they can book here. And as well as the 1 week time. So here's the fun part where we actually get into finding out what events should be showing up on the calendar. So I create a list that's going to contain a map of strings and of objects, and I'll explain what that is in just a second. But there's a particular function called events. There's a particular function called events, which is a part of the Google Calendar API. And I'm able to retrieve a list of those events based off of the calendar ID of my founder. So I pass in that calendar ID, and it retrieves all of the events and stores them into a list of event type. After doing that, I also create a list of event type, which is for the filtered items. So I initially get all my items, which is all of the events on his calendar, but I create a new array list for the filtered items. And that's going to contain all that I need to display on that calendar in just a second. So depending on the session type is a variable that's being passed in from Adalo to my backend. Session type is based off of where they click. Did they click on an ASAP session or did they click on a later session? So if they clicked on an ASAP session, then we're going to be doing some type of logic, and I'll explain what this is here. So we're looping over all of the items that we received from the Google Calendar API, which is all the events on his calendar. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do some null checks. We want to make sure that these calendar events have a start time and they have an end time. So I'm checking right there on line number 115 to make sure that the events have some type of start and end date, right? After that, I'm checking to make sure they actually have a start and end time. Because some events on our calendar can have just today's date but no time. So I'm checking for that as well. After we check to see if it has a date, if it has a time, then I'm making sure that the time of the event, which is this part here, this is the start time, event.getStart.getDateTime. I'm making sure that that value is greater than or equal to time min. And I'll let you know what that is if we scroll back up. Time minimum is basically the current time plus 1 hour. So I want to make sure that we at least start to make sure that the event is greater than or equal to the current time plus 1 hour. Then I want to make sure if I scroll over that the start time is not greater than the time max, right? That maximum time for an ASAP session, which is 24 hours from now. So then if that's the case, if it passed my check, then I'm able to add that event to my filtered events list. And the logic is pretty similar for later, but it's different in a way. The reason for that, if things will stop popping up, the reason for that is because when it comes to a later event, what you're doing is you're comparing not time min, but you're comparing time max. Time max is 24 hours from now. So I want to make sure if I'm selecting a later time slot that the event should be starting 24 hours from now and it should be ending 1 week from now or less. So within 24 hours to 1 week. And that's how I created the logic to add those items to the filter items list, which gets displayed in the calendar that you see. All right, next thing is I had to format it a certain way. So I actually created some code. Here's some more logic that I'll tell you about now. Let's say that a user decides to select a charged up to go location. Remember, there's two options for the user to select. They can select charged up to go location, or they can select charge at my home, my workplace, fill in the blank. Depending on which one they select, there's certain logic for that. If they select the charged up to go location, that means that we're not just going to have that time slot for them. So that means if another user wants that same time slot, we're going to allow up to 3 of our users to come to that location at the same time. So we can be able to be optimal and charge all of those vehicles simultaneously. But if the user decides to select that they want us to charge at their own location, then we're going to only reserve the slot for them, right? Privacy reasons. We're not going to have people pulling up at people's houses, nothing like that. So those are the logics that I have. So I have to make sure in the case where if it's one person and they charge at a charged up to go location, that 2 other people can also book that time slot. Another thing is that there's a certain format that Adalo allows for events to appear in their calendar. And that format is called RFC 3339. So I had to convert my calendar events to that because I was not seeing them show up in Adala whatsoever. But what I had to do that was go into their forum and be able to ask them, of course, how do I do that? Because I had some difficulty with that, and that was one struggle I did face with Adala. So once this pops back up, I will show you more of what I've done here. Cool. Okay, here we go. Let's see what else we got here. So this was some logic I created as well, just making sure I had a variable called max number of slots. So in the case where someone actually books a charge up to go slot, I'm making sure that that person is not able to book more than the max, which is, for example, 3. Okay. Let's see what else we got. All right, there's also a function I created about booking the time slot, and this is where this goes as well, just to show you some more code here. Okay. So what I do in order to book the time slot, I'm able to send whatever event that they select on the calendar. I send the data about that event over to my API here. So that's what's inside of this event data that you see right here. Then what I'm able to do is take that event, I'm able to find it based off of the calendar ID on line 186, as well as I'm retrieving the event ID from this event data object that I sent from Adala. I retrieve that event and I store it in a variable called event to update. Then what I check to see is that, okay, if the event that I'm trying to update has no attendees, then that means that it could possibly be a group event. So what I'm trying to do is this. When multiple people try to charge their vehicles at a charge up to go location, I do not allow for them to see the email list because that should be private, right? So that's one thing that I do as well. Let's see what else we got going on here. Oh, another thing I'm going to do is show you more about the Stripe API as well. So that's what I'll do, just to show you how I'm able to retrieve the products and take into account the logic that's necessary for making sure, depending on the time of day, you get this base multiplier. So I have a function called getBaseMultiplier here, and what happens is that whenever someone books a session, depending on the time of day that they decide to book that session, they'll get a certain rate. So I'll show you how that goes. So first things first is that when it comes to getting the current time, that's one thing that I do. I create a variable called date here, and I retrieve the current time and I store that in there. After doing that, goodness gracious, 1 second. Let's see, okay. Okay, here we go. Perfect. All right, so let's get back to it here. All right, so what I do is that I retrieve the date based off of the time slot that they selected. Then after I do that, I extract if it's AM or if it's PM. So I store that accordingly. And what I check to see is that if it's AM, and if it's between pretty much the hours, the peak hours is this, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So if they register for a slot between those times, that's considered to be peak hour. And what I have to do is, in the Stripe database, I'm retrieving actual product from his account, which is basically, it has a lookup key. And that lookup key is called peak_hours. So I set that up where whenever we look for the peak_hours lookup key, it's going to retrieve the one that has the highest value based off of that peak hour, that they've set, okay? So that's peak_hours. And then what it does is it searches for that price in the database, and from there, it just converts it to a value that's meaningful to us, which is a double, which is a float value in that case. Okay, and if it's not peak hours, so this logic, Lord help me today. 1 second here. Thank you for your patience, of course. I appreciate that. This thing is finicky. All right, once it comes back up here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so for example, this logic here is checking to see if it's peak hours. If it's not, it's going to hit this else statement, and in that case, it's going to get the default price, because I have 2 prices set up for this product. One is that peak hours price, one is the default price, which is outside of peak hours. So if it is not within the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. time frame, then we're going to make sure to retrieve the default price and display that accordingly. Okay, cool. So that's that logic in a nutshell. I think I have some more for you as well in regards to the calendar events. Let's see what I got here, payment service. Oh yeah, okay, so this one here is in regards to actually, let's see, canceling holds. So that's one thing that can happen, right? So of course we're able to initiate that pre-authorization on their account, but we also make sure to remove that hold from their account after they've gotten service from us. So one thing we do is we have to cancel the hold just to make sure that they're getting charged the right amount. So I have some logic for that as well, which will then remove that $75 hold and actually charge them the correct amount. And how that's being done is this. Let's say that the person we actually come to their vehicle, we decide to charge their vehicle. Based off of how long their charging session was, we determine how many kilowatts per hour their vehicle was actually charged. Then we multiply that kilowatt per hour rate to the base multiplier, which could be 55 cents if it's peak hour, or let's say 45 cents if it's not peak hour. Then we're able to charge them that amount, and that difference is removed off. So we just put that hold on there just because we want to make sure we get the maximum amount of value that we need from their account, just in case, let's say they come on E, they're on empty for their vehicle, so we want to make sure we don't charge them more than what they should be charged. And what I want to do as well is just talk a little bit more about Adalo and things I've learned about it, because I've been a part of the MVP development program for 2 cohorts now, and each cohort is a 6-week term. So I want to talk about what I learned when it comes to Adalo itself. It is MVP ready, but MVP is subjective depending on who you talk to, right? Again, I had a founder, should I say, who needed more than what Adalo could provide. So what do you do in that case? You have to pull out your toolkit. And that's why I say, even though this is a no-code tool, you still got to know some code to know what you're doing. Truly, you have to know. And I come with some years of experience in knowing about back-end development. That's my specialty, so I was able to help him and not per se disappoint him because he wanted more than what Adalo could actually provide. With Adalo, it has a built-in database, and anytime you think about built-in anything, you think about the fact that it's going to be slow, right? So that's the biggest thing. The more data you have going on in the background, the slower the application will be. So this application is fine right now, but one of the things I can see being improved and why I'm going to talk about Flutterflow is because this application here has a credit card form that I was showing you all. This credit card form only allows credit or debit information to be entered. But what happens if I want Apple Pay, I want this pay, I want that pay? What can I do? That leaves the customer in a rough spot if they don't have their actual credit card or debit card info with them. So one improvement I can see is using additional no-code tools to be able to use Apple Pay and Google Pay. So right now he's limited with that, and I feel like that could be a challenge because we want the quickest way we can pay. We don't have time to enter in these credit card credentials, and we're in a digital world today. All right, so that's one thing I can see being improved, and that's why I'll talk about Flutterflow and what that offers as well compared to Adalo. In addition to that, the scalability, like I said, is very slow because the database is built in. But when I talk about Flutterflow, Flutterflow has an external database called Firebase. Has anyone heard about Firebase by chance? Okay, I see a few. Cool. So Firebase external database is a no SQL or no SQL database, meaning there are not relationships between each of the tables in that database. And it's much faster because they provide tools in Firebase to be able to scale as quickly as possible, because you have to think about tomorrow, not just today. And that's what we're thinking about, because we want the quickest app to get into market, but then as soon as we can't handle what it provides, that's the end all be all. So that's just one of the things I've learned as well with Adalo itself. And what I'll do is I'll go into the application and show you some things happening in the back end. One thing you'll notice, as I make this screen a little bit smaller here, is that there are a lot of pages, right? So these are all pages. Every single line that you see, that's a page that's going on inside of this actual application. But you may not see that when I run the front end because it's happening behind the scenes, right? There are certain routes that I have depending on what the user selects. So it can get lengthy when it comes to that. And this is not the best user interface. It's really not the best. It's very finicky, to say the least. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I'm not even going to be playing about that. Because I want to ask, has anyone ever created an MVP app in Adalo? Anybody? Okay, I see 1 or 2. Okay. So if you know, you know. If you don't, you'll be soon to find out that it is no joke when it comes to the basics. Is fine. I'm dragging this button here, I'm dragging a button here. And if you're doing it for just a phone, like this is just a phone app. This works just for phones. But if you're going to create an app for desktop and tablet, it can be difficult because you have all these different layouts. What looks one way on a mobile app will not look the same way on a tablet, on a desktop. And you have to be able to create those layouts and play around to see what really works. And that's why I have that love-hate relationship with it. to say the least. But one thing I have leveraged, like I said, is the API aspect. Because it's not about, oh, this particular Adalo, this tool is the MVP of all no-code tools. I'm not saying that by any means. And I'm not going to say in a second that Flutterflow is the MVP. What becomes the MVP and what's most important is the person that's creating that. You have to be the MVP to determine what tool you're going to use, because there's a million of different no-code tools out there. But it's about which one can you actually bring your expertise to make whatever isn't a reality become a reality. And that's the main gist of things right there, because I can tell you Adalo works. It creates apps. It can create e-commerce apps, right? It's not going to be your Stripe. It's not going to be your Shopify equivalent whatsoever, but it'll get the job done for basic things, okay? But I think it's lucrative to get into for sure. And what I'll do is just talk about the difference some more when it comes to Adalo and Flutterflow. So on the left here, we have Adalo, and on the right, we have Flutterflow. Adalo was created in 2018, so it's relatively new. There are other no-code platforms. Have y'all heard of Nixcode by chance? Okay, I see a few with Nixcode, okay. Yeah, but I think that was created by Sidney Davis. So Nixcode is another no-code tool that you can use. You got Adalo, like I said, created in 2018. You also have Flutterflow, which was created in 2020 by Google developers. So this is a Google-based application. And with Flutterflow, it's based off of a language called Flutter. It's fairly new. So I don't know if a lot of people have heard about it or not, but it does a lot of work. And the thing about both of these applications is this. They both can be published to the Google Store or to the App Store. So that's the thing, because when you think about applications, usually you think about native applications. And when I say that, I mean using Swift, right? Because Nick knows about that. Using Swift to be able to create the Apple applications, or using Java, which I'm familiar with, to create the Android applications, or Kotlin, if you know about Kotlin, K-O-T-L-I-N. That's also being used for the applications today for Android. But that can take a long time for development, and being a one-man, one-woman show when it comes to mobile apps is no joke. That's why this is a lifesaver. Both of these tools are. That's what I'll say. Both of them are lifesavers. They both serve a different purpose, and you have to play around with them to really determine which one you want. Now, I will say that Adalo is much easier to get started with than Flutterflow. Reason for that is because you have to know about Flutter in a way. You have to know about the language, and it's just really difficult at times, but once you get experience with Adalo, you can be able to go over to Flutterflow. So this is what I say when it comes to who's the real MVP, right? Adalo is a great starting point. It'll get you an app going, it'll run, you can publish it to your Google Play and Apple Play stores, Apple stores, respectively, right? The thing is this, once you get to a point where you have a lot of customers coming in and you want to be able to do certain functionalities, you're going to have to get out of Adalo. It's great for a great testing point. You can test it out with thousands of customers and get that feedback that you need to take your idea to the next level. But eventually, there'll come a point in time where you'll be able to get to the next level. And I think that's Flutterflow. So Flutterflow is like that next step right before native development. Because, for example, it takes a long time and it's a big learning curve to learn Swift unless you're in the Apple Developer Academy, or it takes a long time to learn Flutter. If you have a life outside of all of this, because I do a lot of stuff, so I know y'all probably do too, that's why y'all are here today. But when it comes to development itself, you have to take the necessary time out of your schedule to learn these tools. And that's the biggest thing. If you can learn it and take the time to do it, you can be fine with either or. So that's why I say, in a nutshell, it's not about either one of these tools being superior or the other. It depends on what stage you are in life. It can serve their purposes. But I really say that the real MVP is everybody in this audience, right? So when I say MVP this time, I mean most valuable player. The reason I say we're all MVPs is this. You all have a certain toolkit. You all have a certain set of tools that you use on a daily basis to get the job done. There's not one tool that's just packaged for everything you want and you can just use that and say, that's everything I need in a nutshell. No. You pull from your toolkit and you combine all that together to create that synergy that you need to be able to get it done. And that's why for me, I wanted to show you today that I use additional APIs to get the job done, right? Adalo's great, but I needed more, my founder needed more. And that's why I use those APIs to connect it to Adalo and get it together to work together. But for the future, realize whether it's Adalo, it's Flutterflow, it's Nixcode, whatever, fill in the blank, right? It's not about which of these tools is great, it's about your toolkit and where you're starting with to understand the purpose of that. And what I'll just show you really quick is just the Flutterflow interface really quick, just so you can get an idea of what that looks as well. So So Flutterflow, right? So there's a lot of widgets on the left here that you'll see. You'll see text, you'll see columns and rows, and it's pretty similar to Adalo when it's set up, but the interface is very more robust, should I say, when it comes to that. So there's buttons that you can drag in, and then you're able to configure these buttons on the right. So it's a lot of language that you may or may not be familiar with, and that's where that learning curve can come in. You can drag in buttons, you can drag in your text, for example. And this is the reason why, okay, here we go. So let me see here as I wait for this to come up. But, okay, so here we go in just a second. I'm hoping so. Okay, let's get this going here. Right, so for example, I'm able to see this text, and I'll actually change the color of this, because right now I have the color being green, and I can go into the background here into design, for example, and change the primary text. So they have design systems. Raise your hand if you're familiar with what design systems are. Okay, cool. So I got some UI people in here. One thing you can do is change the color. So I'm going to change the color to, let's say, black or whatever I can find that's pretty dark. We'll do like a dark purple here. All right, so if I go back here to my tool that I was at, you'll see now that the text color is actually purple, like I selected. So that's one thing. You can go around and play with the design systems and set them up accordingly in this screen and play around with the way you want things to look. Another thing with design systems is that you're able to set up your different sizings that you want for your applications, because most of the time developers or founders want apps to be different sizes. You got your mobile, your desktop, your tablet, and they may want all three. So that's how you configure that. Also, you're able to create multiple pages in here. And another thing about Flutterflow that has a great advantage over Adalo, we're talking about AI at this point, right? We want something to be done the quickest way possible. So this is where Flutterflow comes in, because we're able to create a page with AI. Let's say what kind of page we want. Let's see. Anybody want to volunteer and let me know what kind of page they want to be created? You can think of anything. Go ahead.
About a map that displays all the locations of the stations.
Okay, cool. Let's see what it can do. Create a page that contains a map to display. Let's say a location. I'm gonna keep it generic right now just because it won't have any data process, but I'm gonna just show you what happens. You can tell them to create a page doing whatever you want. So I'll say create a page that contains a map to display locations. And eventually what it'll do is it'll create that, and we'll see if we like it or not. But you can do multiple generations. Just like ChatGPT, you can do the same thing within Flutterflow. So that's one advantage, because whenever you're able to incorporate AI to make things easier for us, even though we know how to code, sometimes it's best to leverage our tools because of time efficiency. So that's where Flutterflow comes in. It has a great advantage over Adalo. So in just a second, you'll be able to see what it came up with, and you can kind of see, because I don't know if it really did what it needed to do. And this is why it is alpha. It says alpha, but really giving beta vibes, to say the least. So maybe I need to be more specific. Maybe that's it too. So. Right, there you go. So we can change that around. So maybe I'm the beta. Okay, I need to get it together. But create a page that contains a Google map to display locations such as Detroit, whatever. Now I have another generation that I can do really quick and see if it displayed, because it did do what I guess what it's supposed to do, but I guess I got to be more specific as well. So let me see if this works. Hopefully this time it does what it needs to do. But this is very helpful, because when you're creating all these different pages, it takes a lot of time. So, but again, okay, so it's embarrassing me. Right, exactly. You gotta play with the sounds. Let me think of something I can do. Okay, I can say create a basic calculator. Like, it should be able to do that. If it knows, I mean, you just embarrass me at this point. Because what is this? I mean, it's a car, but it's not a map, so. Okay, I'm gonna have to put a face down on you. Like, this is not hard-eye worthy. Okay, thank you. You gotta get that feedback. That's another thing, giving that feedback that is necessary so it can know better next time if it actually listens like it says it's supposed to, right? So create a page that, I don't know what the heck to say at this point. I'll just say create a page that contains a calculator. Like, it should be able to do that. And hopefully it's not gonna give me a picture of a calculator, so let me not do that. Create a page that allows me to calculate basic arithmetic. Okay, because yeah, it will really not interpret what you say unless you really say it specifically. So I say contains a calculator, probably would have gave me another image of a calculator, but this time around, it should give me an actual calculator, hopefully. Yeah, so that's just one thing. AI is the future. It's really the past as well. People have been getting started. People have been doing AI for years. It's just the fact that now we're getting involved with it. And then now, like, where is this calculator at? Because I obviously don't see it unless it's blending in. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, you say create a page that allows me to calculate basic arithmetic, but I don't see a calculator. And I know y'all definitely know it as well. So, let me see if I gotta click on something here. Nope, so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just iffy. It says alpha, it is not ready for the market, to say the least. But it's like, the more specific you are with it, the better off you'll be, to say the least. All right. So that's some of the things you can do in here. I would play around with any of these tools, get your feet wet. I would start with Adalo first. That was my home base. But now I'm just seeing, just because Adalo doesn't provide me with everything I need, I was thinking that I may need a Flutter Flow, but it may just be that I need to reevaluate my toolkit to see what's in it before I start judging the no-code platforms. Because they do their job, right? And when we say no code, we don't mean that there's no code, period. Because how can you create something that's digital like that without code? It's just the fact that there are developers, right? And some of you may do stuff like this, but there are developers in the background who are creating that code that you need in order to use these drag and drop tools. And then they're just asking you to be able to enter the data you need. So like one thing behind the scenes, right? If I go over to Adalo, which is more user-friendly, there are so many different components to choose from. Like we have text, we have buttons. And what you see here, if I zoom in some, oops, this is why, oh Lord, okay, bear with me. After you touch something, it just wants to stop. Okay, so as we get this back up, nope. All I'm trying to let y'all know is that there are many different buttons and widgets within Adalo, and I wish I could show you here. All right, so for example, as I move things around, I'll just keep it right here. So on this particular page, I showed you earlier when I was using the application, but one thing that's inside of this page is that you'll notice on the left here, it says, please note that upon hitting the confirm button on the next screen, $1, and then it doesn't show the amount, right, in that red little text box. It says charging session convenience fee amount. What's happening here is that whenever somebody goes to this page, it's using the API that I created in the back end, and it's retrieving that value, and it dynamically shows that value on the screen when the person runs the application. So we use something called magic text, and that is the way that you're able to get these values from the back end and display them in such a format when they're actually the application is being run. So that's why you see convenience fee amount right here. You don't see the $25 that's actually being charged. So that means if my founder goes into his Stripe account right now and he decides to update the value to $26, it'll show when the app is running that that value is the current convenience fee amount. As well as the base multiplier. You don't see 55 cents shown here. You just see charging session base multiplier. Simple as that. And same thing for the authorization amount. That's all in the back end, and my code is retrieving those values as well in that back end. Okay? And then you'll see here, I want to show you more about how the APIs are called real quick. So let's say I click on the submit button, and you'll see there's so many different things that's happening when that submit button is clicked, and I'll show you what's going on. So one of the things I have to do is get the customer ID. Whenever someone creates an account in here, I have to create them a customer ID in Stripe to associate all their purchases with. So that's one of the things I'm doing here is getting their customer ID to associate that purchase with that so I can retrieve the payment method they used and then be able to create the hold. So I'm getting the customer ID, I am getting the payment information from their account, then I'm going to create the hold that's necessary in the back end. So what's happening here is this. I am passing in a bunch of amounts. I'm passing in the authorization amount, I'm passing in, a couple different values. Let me show you what's going on behind the scenes here. For those who know about APIs, right, what I'm doing to be able to get that data to Adalo, for example, I'm doing an authorizing of the intent. So just to let you know what's going on in a nutshell, I have to go back before I create the hold. 1 second here. Oh yeah, this is perfect. Okay, sorry, I'm in the right place. So to create the hold, what you need to do is pass in the amount that you want to charge them. Pass in the amount that you want to charge them, what currency am I charging them in? What's their customer ID? What's their payment method? What's their email? And that will allow for Stripe to get that data and say, oh, I want to create a payment intent. I want to charge them this particular amount. So that's what I'm doing in the back end, but you don't see all that just because you see the front, the UI itself. All right. So it's, like I said, Adalo is much more easier to use. You have your databases that are built in here that look something like this, right? You have your tables, you're able to see the data like this per se, but anyone who knows about Firebase knows that when it comes to databases, much more robust, and they're going to last a lifetime because of that. So set yourself up for success instead of for failure, and that's why I say between the two of these applications, Adalo, Flutterflow, whatever, it really doesn't matter. It depends on where you're starting from. For me, I didn't have any experience with no code when I first got started, but I had development experience. So we started with Adalo, got some applications done, and I learned about all the intricacies of it to understand that it's a great platform. It has built many MVPs that are now on the market. And of course, it publishes to the app stores, and that's what we care about the most, making sure we can see our product in the app store. And once we do that, think about the next steps is what's going to carry us on for success. So whether you're creating this application for yourself or you're creating it for a founder, what matters the most is the toolkit which you're bringing to the table versus the tool itself, right? Because you have any tool you want in your toolkit, but if you don't know how to use it properly, then at the end of the day, how are you going to get the job done? So that's why I say between who's the real MVP, Adalo or Flutterflow, it's up to you to make that choice. It's up to you to be the most valuable player to indicate, to identify what is the minimum viable product tool I should use. So I thank you very much. I want to also take this time out to see if there are any questions before I wrap up today. Any questions? Anything Adalo, Flutterflow, MVP development, app development? Yes, sir.
So once you develop this MVP and you've done your research, then you're like, how is it? Are you starting over from scratch when you build the next version of it, or are you able to take your code that you have existing in these apps?
Right, so it all depends on if you want to stay with the current platform. So let's say you built that app out in Adalo and you publish it to the App Store, you want to make some updates to it, then you can keep the current code that you have and make those updates to it and then publish it. So it'll just be another version of what you have, but that code will still be there. So it's not, the only time you would have to create it, a new one, is if you want to move out of that existing platform to something different. Okay, so if you have an app that you created, you published it, but you want to make updates to it, then in that case what you would do is just make the updates in Adalo in this editor that you see right here. Make the updates, and there's a way to be able to publish it. When you have this enabled, you're able to publish the app to Android and create these different builds. And those builds represent newly built versions of the application. So that same code can exist.
So you want to go from low code to low code.
Right, so if that's the case, low code.
You can add more to.
Right, so you said from low code to like low code pretty much. In that case, what you can do, so these are like the steps I say. Adalo, that's the basic no code platform you can use. Then moving over to MoCode, right, what you can do in that case is, for example, there's native languages. If you're fluent in them, like I was mentioning before, you have Swift, you have Java or Kotlin on the Android side, you have Swift on the iOS. In that case, you really have to, it's a big learning gap, gap, just because we're dealing with no code to a lot of code at that point. That's the goal, but the best thing is having these cross-platform applications, where Adalo, you're not doing code, but they're still getting published to those stores. Even Flutterflow, you're not doing code, but you're still getting published to those stores. But if you're trying to get to that point, that's where a bigger budget comes in, that's where more developers are needed on your team. This is a one-man, one-woman job for the most part, but once you start trying to scale up to an app that does more because this is limited, that's when you'll need a team to do that, and that's also possible. And most people do that, but you gotta start at base one first, and then get to that point. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
So it's like a beginner, I guess, like, how would you get into like the MVP?
Okay.
How you started in that?
Right, so for me, how I got started, I was going to say this computer is iffy, I'm glad you're asking questions, but for MVP, how I got started is just, this is all it takes. It's the power of sending a connection, right? For me, I went on to Hacking with the Homies website, and then I saw Mac, and I sent a request to him. I said, oh, he got it going on, let me check him out and see how we can be able to network and collaborate together. So I sent him a LinkedIn request, and then maybe the next day he said, hey, do you want to sign up for our cohort we have for MVP development? Like, I literally got the receipts to show that, where he just asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. I didn't have any skill set in it whatsoever, but I said that money was looking right, so I said, let me learn this and see what it's about, to say the least. I'm just saying, because it's so lucrative. It is so lucrative. So I decided to join, and then from there was training. So with Hacking with the Homies, through Detroit Black Tech, they offer the opportunity for you to learn how to do this development, right? So I didn't learn it on my own. I took a course that Jessica offers, and that's all through Black Tech, that's all through Detroit Black Tech. And that 6-week course, it was asynchronous, well, it was a live course I attended, but she offers them also for asynchronous reasons, right? So I took that course for 6 weeks. I got certified because I took an exam after that, and then from there I was ready to go. And then they selected me for the program. So that's the process to get started with MVP development. They offer that through Detroit Black Tech, and I can show you that real quick as well, is this program here as far as learning the app development for Adalo. So through the site, which I'll just look it up and see, because I cannot find a direct link, but I'll look up Adalo and see if I can find it. But eventually I'll show you in just a second a link that will show you more about that. But that's the way you really get involved, is just by taking a course like that, because it's really a niche. It's a niche. It's not everywhere. Everybody's not doing it, and that's the reason why people will come up to me asking to create an app for them quickly, because it's a market for it. But a lot of people don't do it. So there's something called MVP developer training. She offers this pretty much every fall, and then I believe summer as well. And this is a basically 6-week course. You take the course and you get the chance to, I think it's 4-week course. 4-week course, 2 hours, and you learn about the basics of Adalo. And that's how you get your feet wet. Then you get in contact with Mac or Jessica about Tech Town, and that's how you get into the program and you start building those relationships. And I'm telling you, compounds like that. That's the main reason I created a business with it, because of that. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Cool. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Just a follow-up on that. Does the program specifically focus on like low-code, no-code solutions like Flutter, Flow, and
It doesn't at this point. It focuses just on Adalo at this point, but I'm going to be talking to Matt because I feel like Flutterflow is the next best thing for those who are past at Adalo and they understand the basics. It's time to level up the skill set and learn more. So I believe the next thing, hopefully at some point, is to allow for us to be able to have the option within MVP development to select between Adalo or Flutterflow. So right now it's just Adalo, but I think in the future we're going to expand out just for those who can understand more about Flutterflow.
are there any programs that are similar for like people who wanted to code the solution from scratch?
At the moment, it's right, because do you have experience yourself personally with like the native languages and things like that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mainly web development stuff, not so much like app development. I have some native experience in app development, but like, you have programs that help kind of the same thing in MVP, but not
Using-
the no-code solution.
Without the no-code solutions. So not at this moment. I think we just focus on no-code because we know it's a 6-week time frame. So based off of us getting, let's say, the founder's requirements week 1, we have literally 5 weeks or less to turn something around, test it, and all of that. So that's the reason why with MVP we select Adalo, because it's the quickest platform we can test things in, get it going, showcase it. Because that's what happens after the end of the 6-week program, is we get outside of these doors here, we have tables set up, and we go through and actually demo our apps to everyone to see if they're interested. So because of that time frame, we focus on just no code because we want the quickest turnaround at this moment. Good question. Yes, sir.
So I know we're talking about like MVP and stuff. I'm also thinking about like maturity of the product. And I know at least like React and some other like front-end frameworks that things that scale with that. Initially like create React app, for example. And at some point in the maturation of the product, kind of want to migrate away from using that. For various reasons, right? I'm wondering if we're adopting no-code solutions. Once a product is a certain point of maturity, and what that migration process looks like, or to kind of lock into Adalo, or whatever no-code solution.
Right. Right, so you're basically asking, okay, you start off with Adalo, you're trying to figure out how do I get to the point when I'm ready enough, I have enough profit, I want to get to the point where I can actually scale out of this thing and move away from that platform.
Can you move away from it? What is that?
Right, that's a great question. I haven't had the opportunity myself to do it, but I really think that when it comes to the databases itself, one option they have when it comes to removing that data, because let's say you are using Adalo and you have a lot of customers set up on it, you're going to want to migrate that data out. And the format that comes in Adalo, for example, is the databases they have. They have CSVs that get exported, so all your data can be moved out the platform. It's just called, how do I get that data in as seamless as possible? How do I take that CSV format and import it into the new database I have? I haven't worked with that part yet. I just know that that would seem to me the best route to take it, is where on Adalo itself, there's a way to download that CSV. And once you do that, I'm not sure, and maybe somebody else may know in the audience, but just the way of taking a CSV, you have to create some type of script, I would think, to take that CSV and convert it to the format to input the actual columns into the database of your newly tool that you're going to be playing with, right? So I think that would be the best thing to do when it comes to that on the database side. Now, you know, all the screens, of course, will have to be created in that new platform as well that you're working on. But as far as the data, because that's the most important to me, is the data itself, is being able to export CSVs out of a download specifically. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
So I wanted to ask about with like a dollar or is there like do you have the ability to write like a custom module if you wanted to and all that?
Right. That's a great question. Yes, sir. Just to repeat that question you're asking, is there a way to create a custom component of your own if you're interested? Yes, and that's why I say the tool may come how the tool is packaged, but it's about external assets that you have that you're bringing in. So that's possible. And for example, if I go to the components here, you'll have the option further down to see that, like in the marketplace, let's say I type in, let's see, which one was it? CSV. Not CSV. No, that should work. 1 second. I'll just type in what I was typing in before, which I totally forgot. But let me just go to the marketplace so you can see. That's the easiest thing. But in the marketplace itself, people charge for products all the time. I have some downloaded. I'm just trying to see if I can figure out PDF. Yeah, okay. So marketplace components. What happens here is that people like yourself who have additional skill set, I believe this is done in Java, maybe, I have to find out, but depending on your skill set, you can create your own components that people may need in Adalo and sell those. And that's another side hustle that you can do in Adalo. Because I had to purchase a component for my other founder I work with. She needed a way to export the data in Adalo to a CSV. So we purchased a particular component from them, and then I've been working with them in the background just to make sure it works with her data. So that's another option. If you're into development, you know what you're doing, you can be able to create these components and sell them for people to use. Great question. Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit more about, I think I heard you say you have a business and building MVPs for people. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what is the process? How long do you usually take to build an MVP person?
That's a great question. So just to reiterate, you're asking pretty much you want to know about the process that it takes for me to work with the founders outside of TechTown and be able to scale their build, be able to help them create their MVPs, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, yes. So how that went, and the reason I created a business is because of the savings, tax benefits, write-offs, all that beautiful stuff that you get when you become a business owner, right? We could be an employee all day, that is beautiful for those who want to be employees. But there are so many opportunities for you to succeed outside of employment when you create your own job, you create jobs for others. So that's the first disclaimer I'll give there. When it comes to development, the reason I created the business is because for me, working from home, so let's say I'm working from home, I get to write off my office, get to write off all that good stuff. Now, when it comes to creating the relationship to do that, before you create a business, you have to have a relationship. So what I did is that I leveraged the relationships that I got from TechTown. I worked with those founders for the 6 weeks. Now, the founders at the end of the 6 weeks get the opportunity to continue to work with you if they want to do so. And TechTown provides additional funding for that up to a certain amount. So what I would do, you have to build that relationship with them during the 6 weeks. After that, ask them if they would like to continue development with you, and then that brings in the opportunity for you to quote them. You, based off of where you left off after the 6 weeks, there probably will be work that needs to be done. Because most of the apps, when we finish the 6 weeks, are MVP ready per se. They're not all the way done. They have some bugs that need to be fixed. So what the founder has to do, particularly with TechTown, they have to write down a list of the items they need to be completed to be MVP ready. And then what you do is you take that statement of work and you create a quote for it. You generate a quote, whatever your hourly rate is, and you calculate how much it will be for that. Then you have to send that quote back to TechTown, and then from there, that's how you're able to, the founder gets the funds, and they distribute based off of whatever your terms are. You want to get paid monthly, you want to get paid per milestone, whatever that is. So you have to set that up initially when you send that quote, what your terms are. After that process is done, then I have to sit down with my founder and write down the requirements. Right, we go through the requirements. I have to estimate how much time I think is going to take for each of the particular items to get done. And I'm working with them, whether that's on a weekly basis or what, but I'm always providing them with updates to let them know I'm working on what needs to be done. Then of course you send the invoice out, you get paid that way. So for me, it's easier to get customers that you've already worked with, right? So I work with them through TechTown. Now I'll let you know, okay, I'm going to be quoting you through my business. So that's why I created the business, because I know there's so many tax benefits to it, and I know this is something I want to do long term, so that's why I did that. But if you have a specific question in regards to that process, please let me know. I just gave an overview at the moment. Okay? Thank you. Any more questions? Because I know I'm the person that's basically holding y'all for lunch, so I want to make sure, because I got to eat too, so I want to make sure everything's good. But any more questions? Oh, last thing, I also want to make sure I put up my QR code. If you do want to connect outside of this, please don't hesitate. I hope this screen stays up long enough for y'all to do that. But I appreciate you all so much. Again, TechTown was the foundation that helped me get started, and I'm just trying to build from there and create the MVP apps, and I do other things as well. So just feel free to connect with me. This is my LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And until next time, thank you.
Let's give it up for Chelsea one more time. We'll take a short intermission.